Oh, welcome to this episode of the Skirball Tapes. I'm delighted that you are here. As many of you know, the theme of our series is Radical Imaginations, Indelible Acts. We ask together, who sees our worlds differently and then creates indelible works and beneficial activities from these visions. Our guest today is Naila Atrash, a major theater artist from Syria and now in exile in the United States. She is an actress, a director, and a teacher. And with Naila, our format today is going to be a little different. First, Naila and I will talk. And we want to talk about her experience in Syria as an artist there, and then the flight into exile, and for an experience of exile. Then, this is what's different. We're going to see a clip from one of her performances about the experience of imprisonment and exile. This will last for about 2 minutes or so, taken from a much longer performance. Then we'll have your questions, and I really want to thank you because your questions in the past have been so interesting after each of our episodes. And please put your questions in the Q&A on your screen. Again, thank you for being there. Hello, Naila. I want to know how you became a globally known director with a home base in Syria. But since our American audiences may have one or two lacunae in their geographical knowledge, would you just tell us quickly about the location and the deep history of Syria, one of the great centers of antiquity? So, with your permission, we're going to put up a map of Syria, and if you could just take us through it a little bit. So there it is.
Yes,
What? Yeah.
Yes, well, as a start, let me tell you that Syria as a term, as a label, is a bit complicated for those who don't have an idea about the history of Middle East. The term Syria or Great Syria was used or had been used since ancient time until the early ages, the early years of the 20th century. It included Syria with its present borders, Lebanon with its present borders, and the historical Palestine. All these three countries used to be called Great Syria. And the present borders of Syria had been carved out from the former Ottoman Empire by Britain and France in 1916 in the agreement that was called Sykes-Picot.
Oh,
it's the winners of the First World War actually divided the Arab or submitted Arab countries into a new demarcation of its borders. And Syria now is, it wasn't this way until after 1916, or more particularly and more precisely in 1920.
That's fascinating. And maybe if we can remove the map now, but I'm glad we saw it. And thank you for that reminder of the deep history of Syria. But your family has been very connected with the history of modern Syria, has it not? And am I right to think that your grandfather, Sultan Atrash, a great Arab Druze leader, played an important role in the Syrian revolution against the French? We have a picture here. Is this your grandfather?
Yes, he's very dear to us. Yes, he is. And I think this picture is after, the revolution of 1925, which lasted to 1927 against the French mandate. And this picture, I think, after the failure of the revolution, where he was exiled, forced to be exiled, and one of the most or the harshest deserts in the Arab world. It's the desert between Saudi Arabia and Jordan, and it's called Al-Azraq, the blue. And I think, and they lived under tent, and we have heard while we were children, many stories, and tales about how life was there, and they will spend days and nights starving without having anything to eat, and yes, I remember my mother once told us a story about how they were starving and how my grandfather disappeared for a while, after which he came, he bringing something. They didn't realize what is this thing, and it turned to be zebra. But after they ate and they finished their meal, he told them that it was zebra, and zebra because it was a deer, animal that you dare not eat. Anyway, if you allow me to speak a little about Sultan Atrash, he was the general commander of the Great Syrian Revolution against the French mandate. And he succeeded actually to unify the Syrian people under the slogan he himself coined that says, God, religion is for God, the homeland is for all. And what's worth mentioning that when in 2011, when the Syrian uprising erupted in an attempt or in an effort to deepen a way of or a sense of nationhood and unity among the Syrians, they adopted and they raised highly this slogan, religion for God and homeland for all. So this is a Sultan al-Atrash, and he was very known in his speech, that his speech and his public action were entirely devoid of any religious symbols.
So when you were growing up, how old was he when you were born then? He was in his 60s, in his 70s? He was still very...
No, I was late 50s. Yes.
But he knew you as a child, didn't he?
Oh, we lived with him. The early death of my parents made us very attached to our grandparents. Well, we lived with my grandfather until, before I went to study in Bulgaria.
So you grew up with this heroic but loving figure who taught you, it sounds like he taught you patriotism.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, because since children, we were hearing these stories about um, the revolutionaries and about the legend that happened against the French mandate. Um, he was an example, you know, his life, I mean, the way how he lives, and the way how he acts. He gave us an example of how to behave, um, how to stand up for our rights, how to be there for others. He instilled in us, actually, in very indirect way, these values, to speak our minds, to speak our minds. This was something very important. Yes,
How
and
did he
he's
feel?
very loving, you know, he's very loving. We were always, you know, somewhere sticking in him. Yeah.
But how did he feel about you going into the theater? Did he support this choice? You have said that the theater is a hard world. And here his beloved grandchild wanted to go into the theater. And how did
Yes.
he feel about that?
He, well, you know, um, mm, mm, before before I went to Bulgaria, I went to the village in order, you know, to spend some time with him as a kind of saying goodbye. And I remember very well, in a cold October night, it was snowing outside the village. Our village, you know, in Druze Mountain is a very cold area. It was snowing outside, and we were sitting uh, in the living room, and I was, you know, actually embedding myself in his abaya, and we were watching the TV. And he looked and he said, "Oh, Naila, do you mean that we are going to see you there?" And I laughed and said, "No, I'm going to be in the theater, not TV, you know, it's different." So this is the mentality. And in a way or another, you know, I owe a great deal to my family. You know, I was raised in a family where art was a part of
Oh,
our activities, and it was a part of our life. Visiting exhibitions, art exhibitions, attending theater, cinema, of course, uh, was a tradition in our family, you know. And I have these parents who were open-minded people. My father was a judge in the Supreme Court, but at the same time, he was like, you know, he was an artist, almost an artist uh, in his inner world. Um, but yes, but studying theater and directing in particular, um, mm, it didn't happen, or it wasn't close to my mind until I met that high school teacher.
oh,
She was fascinated by the theater, and she actually first introduced me to the world of drama, where I was encountered with the deeper questions of life. And I was fascinated by the world that is created there in these dramas. Um, I couldn't explain to myself at the time, of course, what is this fascination and why. But I realized that it's something very different from reading a novel, reading a play. So in a retrospect, perhaps I think that the dialogue-based structure that gives me the feeling of now and here, the feeling of actuality that I'm one of these characters, or I live among them, and sometimes I feel like jumping into the action, being with them. So yes, so by that I definitely decided that I want to be in this world. I want
And you
to
very
create
much
this
were.
world.
But then you went to get a master's degree in Bulgaria. And Bulgaria was then a part of the Soviet Union. Did you have any sense of the power of censorship over art, going to school, getting your master's in Bulgaria, or did you, were the arts given a space of freedom there?
No, I was surprised by the police state. I didn't know, that that kind of censorship existed there. But what happened, that we, the students, were very lucky to meet ones of the best artists in the countries, whether when I was in Bulgaria or later when I did this specialization in Soviet Union, in the former Soviet Union. Because, perhaps a part of the reason is that because of the stupidity, I would say, of the strategy or the policy of censorship, those talented, very talented artists used to be, in the most part, from the oppositional. They opposed the regime, the kind of the police regime there. They can't blatantly, they can't loudly speak about that, but they have very different views towards issues, and especially about democracy and how to associate it with producing art. Producing art without democracy, it's something very difficult. So in a kind, they punished them by limiting their activities in the public space. They don't give them or they don't allow them, or they allow them to an extent to work in theaters, in city theaters. Instead, they put them in these academies to teach. So we were very lucky to have these people, actually, those people who taught us that without being oppositional, you can't be in the art.
But that's fascinating that the academy played this double role. It was once where people would go to be silenced, but they learned how to speak in subtle and important ways. But then you left the academy, and then I've looked. I mean, I wish your grandfather could hear us, because I've looked at your career. I haven't seen it all, but I've looked at your career in television and in film. And you produced television, and you acted in television, and you acted in film, and you won a Best Actress award in a film festival. What were some of your favorite roles as you were in the screen world of, for example, the 4-Year War, or was that a favorite role? The 30 episodes?
There are actually many roles that I first of all, let me tell you something that I don't accept any role unless I feel that it would give me, or it would add something to me, and yes. So for example, the role of this lamia and the film, The Chronicle of the Coming Years, I enjoyed so much working this role because I built it entirely. I built this entire character, beyond and out and far from who I am in everyday life. When we teach students, actors, we encourage them to build characters that go beyond who they are in everyday life, to be very different. But we tell them at the same time that no one can get out of her skin. I felt while working this character that as if I'm really getting out of my skin. And that was a great pleasure, because it was a very complicated with psychological disturbances, this kind of character. So I needed to build it from A to Z. Yes, and here I discovered, while building this character, I discovered these parts that were hidden inside me, beneath layers and layers of perhaps some taboos in the society, or in the or political life, or so. This, in my career later, in my teaching career, the actors, I urged them to try to attempt the building of the character and try to explore, to discover these parts inside themselves that went for a long time hidden.
So your vision of acting in all genres is the dynamic integration of self and the creation of the other, or of others. But Naila, it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. But you became a director, you moved into directing, and I'm so impressed by the range of cultures that you have put on the stage or on the screen. You worked with Arabic culture, you worked with Shakespeare, you worked with Moliere, you worked with Ibsen, you worked with Tennessee Williams. And you came back to Damascus and you directed in theaters in Damascus and throughout the Middle East. And you were widely recognized. But can I ask you about a 1978 play called The Night of the Slaves that you were directing in the Hamra National Theater in Damascus? What happened to you?
Well, yes, this is, this is April was 1978. I graduated. I went back to Syria and beginning of the year, exactly January, and this was April 1978. What happened, do you want me to talk about
Just a little,
all
and
this?
then
Okay, so what happened, I chose this play to be my first one that introduced me to my new audience, to my Syrian audience. The play speaks about Quraysh. It's the dominant tribe in Mecca, in the Arab Peninsula, in Mecca, and which is comprised, of course, of of the high class people and the large landlords. When Quraysh succeeded to submit the Islam in its early ages to serve its interests, and by that actually emptying Islam from its and deviating it from its path and emptying it from its values of justice, of bringing equality, of liberating the woman, giving the right of the woman. Islam was very known about giving the woman her rights. And by the way, how I directed the play, the parallel with Al-Ba'ath Party was very striking, that that didn't need comment, because they understood it, I mean, as a comment on Al-Ba'ath Party that once, before seizing power in Syria, presented itself as the supporter of the wronged, of the poor, the defender of justice, of values, of freedom. So I went hours before the opening night. I just passed by the theater in order to check that everything is all right, when I got this telephone call, and it was from a high echelon of the Ba'ath Party. He asked me to come to his office, which was close by Hammer Theater, because there is something very important that he would tell me. And I went, of course, but I guessed what it might be, because all the time when I was doing it and rehearsing it, I was expecting perhaps that, because the discourse is very dangerous. The discourse, the message in the end of this play, that your masters before Islam are the masters in Islam. So it's a very big issue, So I went there, and there he told me that there is no opening tonight. And when I told him that we have invited people already, tickets are sold out. And he said, this is our work, let it us. And he showed me a list of the names of the people that are going to come to see to watch that performance. And they were like 57 persons, 57 officials, and the Syrian government, starting with the prime minister and ministers, deputies, high party echelon, army generals, some of the security apparatus. So I went, my concern is to go and tell the actors. So I tried to, with the help of the technical people there in Hamra, because they smelled the issue, to ask the actors to come earlier. So I told the actors about this decision, and I asked them to do absolutely and to perform the way we've been until now, performing or doing. Yes, and people started coming. What happened now that all the streets leading to Hamra Theatre were blocked by security services cars, absolutely everywhere. You know, it was blocked, and there were a huge number of security entities, agents on the entrance, downstairs at the other entrance. So yes, at the end of the play, you smell the, before the end of the play, I was sitting in the first rows of the theater. The theater as a structure is so much like Skirball theater, you know, it's the same model, you know. And I was sitting with, because I have a life in music, was sitting with the musician who plays the nai, which is like flute, the Arab flute, and the singer who sings. We were sitting together, and like in the first balcony were the other people who were like more than 50. So at the middle of the performance of the show, I announced the entr'acte. All of a sudden, I saw someone, and I went with the actors. And they sent me a person to tell me that they don't have enough time and they want me to come back. I mean, without having this entr'acte. What I did, in a kind of, you know, defying them, I don't know, I went on stage and I said that the entr'acte is not for the audience. It's mainly made for the actors. They need, I mean, when the performance is more than 2 hours, then the rules are.
This is the what we would call the intermission.
These are the rules, and I don't want to violate these rules. And I went back and I went back and I made the actors stay 20 minutes rather than 15 minutes, you know.
This is
at the end of which it was banned. It was banned, and I was banned from being in theater to work in theater for more than 6 years.
But so this is your directorial debut. Your play is banned. You continue, however, in the Al-Assad regime, you continue to act like your grandfather. You continue to be defiant and live by your principles. And you still create a formidable career. A formidable career. When did it become clear that you had to leave? You had been on this tightrope for over 30 years with the Assad regime, authoritarian regime, and pursuing your creativity in theater. When did you say to yourself, I will die if I do not leave? They are no longer content simply with banning me. They are no longer content with simply keeping me from the theater for 6 years. When was the moment when you said to yourself, I love my homeland. I must go into exile? Was it in 2011 with the air? What was that moment for you?
You know, but yeah, but I managed, actually, I managed as many other artists during the time of Assad, we managed to find ways how to go about our artistic work. We tried. It was so, and you know, I was teaching in the Higher Institute of Drama, in the theater. After this was my first play, which was banned. There were other plays that, you know, were banned, and there was a joke in Syria that the productions of Naila, which were banned, are more than the ones that saw the light. We managed to do that because, you know, there is something. Sometimes the heaviness of the censorship spurs you into trying new levels of development as you are seeking a more sophisticated language. In order to smuggle your thoughts and your ideas and to express your art. Always there were two responses to censorship. You do bad art and say nothing, or you say what you want to say. The trick, and to make art, but the trick is to find one's own language that is indirect.
You know, there's a wonderful line from the American poet Emily Dickinson: "Tell the truth, but tell it slant."
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. You know, because what is your goal? My goal is to let the audience, the people, hear me, watch my performances. It's not to be an, you know, an absent.
You know, I have two questions, because we really,
yes,
we could talk and talk and talk, but the question to go back, you're telling the truth and telling it slant. At the same time, you're creating an international career. When was that moment
that I left?
You said, I must leave. You didn't want to go into exile. When was the moment?
Not at all. Not at all. I didn't, and even when I left, I didn't think that, it didn't occur to me that I'll be living in exile. It was, you know, when the Syrian uprising erupted back in 2011, and I was in Cape Town, actually. So I tried to, I asked for the permission to finish my work there, because I want to participate, I want to be with others in this revolution. During this year, I couldn't, of course, theater was a bit far from my context. But what happened, that you start, I mean, you put yourself more in the, and as, or you work as more as an activist, you know. You find yourself more there now in this time. But later, I realized that even if I want to build something in my theater career or do something, it's not now, it's not the time. I will be absolutely paralyzed. I decided to flee, actually, I decided to turn my back and go. Mm, when I felt the threat was huge. What happened that my brother's house was searched by the security services, and they asked him a bunch of questions about me. 2 days later, I went back to my apartment to find it in a horrible way. It was searched. Nothing was taken, but it was, upside down. I understood that this is a message, a message, and I felt fear. I feared imprisonment. I didn't want to be in prison. I feared that. And at the same time, I didn't see that in this kind of climate I can work. It's impossible. I can't do theater. It's impossible. So when I decided to go to exile, it was a kind, as I told you in the beginning, I thought that I'm going for a little while. I didn't expect until the regime toppled, the Assad regime toppled. I didn't imagine that this little while will turn into a permanent state of waiting, and I will be living in exile.
What has happened? It must be so hard. Exile must be so hard, psychologically. Making not just psychologically, aesthetically, making a living. Is it lonely? Is exile lonely?
It is very difficult. Exile in the beginning is much difficult than when you start to get accustomed to exile, to the cultural background, to everything in this new life. It becomes easier, but it will never become home, And that is something very difficult. It will never. Exile, it's a very complicated thing. In the beginning, you are hopeful to, the revolution, the uprising, the Syrian uprising will succeed. And you know that you are outside, but you are waiting this moment. So there is a hope. At the same time, it's you feel that the challenges you must face are that huge, that are deviating you sometimes from what you want to do, but not deviating, rather than paralyzing you. For me, the first days where I felt myself like a jumble of contradictions. Where am I? What am I doing here? How can I manage? How can I find my voice here? And it wasn't. I didn't come to the realization about the importance of my work in exile and how can I turn it into something creative for my people. how can I turn it into something that serves the cause, the just cause of my people? It wasn't until I decided to perform the forbidden monologues.
Ah, that was the turning point. I'm so glad you said that. What we together now would like to show our audiences, the forbidden monologues. I know you perform them in Norway, and there is a clip of them. They last, what, an hour and 40 minutes. We only are going to do 2 minutes. But I'd like, with your permission, to show the audience a segment of the forbidden monologues in which you perform, you direct yourself. Were you the author too?
Actually, forbidden monologues are the stories that are taken from from my fellow scholars at risk. I took 2 of these stories. I combined and added some details of my own story and made a collage about these stories, because our suffering and our life is goes very similar.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's very helpful.
So this is the forbidden monologues.
Right.
We're
now going to see just a scene from the forbidden monologues about the experience of the state moving in on you, and also, as Naila just told us so eloquently, to perform, to direct, to put together the forbidden monologue was the turning point in which she understood how her radical imagination could work among the precarities of exile. Can we see the clip, please?
My trousers as well? Look at me. Don't turn away your eyes. Look at me. I'm talking to you. Do you think I'm your enemy? Do you think so? Well, I'm not your enemy. You have become your own enemy. Today you arrest me. Tomorrow someone will arrest you. And then, what right do you have? Think about it. It's incredible that this happens. You are sending the whole country to damnation. Plato knows. Doing injustice is more unworthy than receiving it. No, please. No, please. Please, I'm begging you. Please, don't humiliate me. Please, I'm begging you. Please, don't let my students see me like this. Please, I will listen. I will listen. I will listen.
Naila, I hope many more audiences can see and hear this, how all of the forbidden monologues, this experience of fear, and the lying, saying to the people who are coming to arrest you and humiliate you, someday it will be you. Be wise, someday it will be you. Thank you. Can we now turn and see if there's a question or two? Would you mind? You've given us so much. Would you mind just answering a question or two?
Absolutely. My pleasure to answer.
Someone, can you talk about, of course, your theater? Can you talk about your teaching? You teach now as an adjunct and professor at NYU in both the Middle East Studies Department and the Tisch School of the Arts. But throughout your career, you have taught, and you were a leading person in the High Conservatory of Drama, Theater, Place of Drama in Damascus. When you teach, what do you do?
When I teach in Syria, it's different from when I teach here. So yes, when I teach, well, in Syria, as my students used to say, that I teach them life more than acting. Of course not, this is a joke. But in Syria, mainly, I focus with my work on my work with the actor on the bodies. Because, you know, Arab body, the body in our society is a taboo to an extent. And so it was a need, there was a need to focus on these bodies in order to free it of these constraints that were caused by these taboos, and to compel and to instill and to make the actors aware of this body and its importance as an expressive tool. And teaching here, the actor, I don't teach acting here, unfortunately. I don't have place for teaching acting, and I miss it so much, but through that place, I direct, you know, I work with actors, of course, and I guide them. The way I do, I don't need, I more focus on the building of their inner world. They are very demonstrative from outside. They are very free with their bodies. The difference from the Syrian or Arab actor, what they need is to build the inside, the inner world. They can't be so much dramatic. There is something, yes, we can be very easily dramatic. I mean, a person of us. So I need more, not time, but I need to summon up some tools and things in order to build this inner life and word.
We have some superb questions here. So I'm just going to give them to you and perhaps a short answer, because I want you to speak at least a sentence to each of the questions we have waiting for you. The first, is theater a consolation for you? A consolation for you, an artist in exile?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I said that it was my turning point when I started the forbidden monologue. It is a great consolation because, you know, it's first it gives you the chance. What I directed here were our plays, Syrian plays, Arab plays, something that speaks about our people, our life. So this is a kind of, this helps so much. I find a voice, you know, through these performances. It's definitely a
Well,
consolation.
that connects the second question is, how do you stay involved in activism in exile? Or how do you stay in touch with loved ones who are still working for revolution? Are there after the terrible Civil War, you must see many ghosts, but how do you stay involved with activism in exile and with your loved ones?
Yes, it's absolutely, you know, I stay in touch with first all the artists that are sparse all over the world, you know, but through some organization and association, art association and organization, Arab Syrian, and that help these artists to find their ways. They fund these association, these organizations. They fund or help fund projects that Syrian artists like to do, whether these artists are inside Syria or outside Syria. You know, so I'm a member in most of these organizations, and I read first reader for their plays or any project that they want to do. So I keep in contact with them. To be involved more in activism, yes, it's by, you know, it's by telling the stories of my people.
Oh.
This is the way. And I did it, and I still want to do it, because by telling the stories, it's very different, you know, to lecture about Syria, to talk about the genocide, to talk about everything. It's different to see it visualized through the actor
and the story. Yeah.
Exactly, the intonations, the gestures, what make the story lodged in the consciousness of the spectator. So I did that for a time. We stopped during the COVID, but we can, and we can always resume it. But what I want to say that I hope of these stories that people, the American audience, would touch level of humanity that can initiate kind of change in the moral sensibility, in the way how they react to what is happening in the world.
I think you've answered one of the questions: advice for people who are working for social change. And also, there is a theater movement. There are writers, still brave writers, inside Syria. I wish our hour were not up. I want to thank you. I just want to thank you, Naila, for being with us. I want to thank our colleagues at the Skirball Center. I want to thank the audience for being with us, but I am so grateful that I could talk to Naila Atrash, an artist, a person of courage and grace, who left her homeland but never forgot it, and tells the stories of her homeland, as well as living in exile. Our next guest will be Hélène Cixous. I'm sure Naila knows her, the French writer and philosopher. It will be December 13th, Tuesday at 10 a.m. That will be 4 p.m. Paris time for Hélène. But again, Naila, all blessings on you. All blessings on you.
Thank
And
you.
to the audience, a happy Thanksgiving for one and all. Thanks to your family tradition. And thanks to you, that young kid director who stood up to the security police and knowing that she would probably be closed up. You have never lost your courage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.